So, what is emotional abuse? Because honestly, defining it is one of the hardest parts of this process. Emotional abuse is one of the most difficult types of abuse to identify because it is so hidden, insidious, and confusing. The damage caused by emotional abuse, while significant, can occur so slowly that the victim hardly notices it at first. The damage can be so subtle that it is easy for victims to minimize it, deny it, or believe they are imagining it. Unlike physical abuse, with physical abuse, it's very straightforward. If someone has a broken arm or there's a bruise, it's very easy to see. It's clear cut. But emotional abuse, the whole process is one that creates a lot of confusion. The person who's being abused often does not have a lot of self-awareness or a lot of clarity at that moment because confusion and diversion is what the abuser is trying to create. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when someone who's being abused tries to go to someone else for help or just to get advice, other people can tend to minimize the severity of what's going on and kind of say, oh, that you're overreacting. Unfortunately, that's common. And there's a reason why, because everybody can say unkind things sometimes. Everyone can be emotionally manipulative sometimes. So what's the difference between someone who is occasionally unkind and someone who's actually committing emotional abuse? So this is going to give you just a broader definition of what abuse typically is. Abusive relationships are a pattern of abusive and coercive behaviors used to maintain power and control over someone else. So emotional abuse isn't someone said something mean to you once. It is when they are using their words or manipulating your emotions as part of a larger pattern of control. They're trying to exert dominance and control over you, and they are doing it through their words and through your emotions. So this is a list of symptoms that are good indicators that someone is being emotionally abusive. If they are aggressively trying to control your life. If they flatter you 1 minute, then withhold love or approval in order to punish you. If they try to drive away your friends and loved ones to isolate you and increase your dependence on them. If they don't seem to value your thoughts or feelings. If they use threats or intimidation to win an argument. If they get angry and jealous if you talk to someone else. If it seems you can never do anything right in their eyes. If they tell you no one else would appreciate or love you the way they do. If they call you insulting and demeaning names. If they are preventing you from being independent, going to school, or getting a job. If you have to obsessively account to them for every penny you spend. If they constantly blame you for everything that goes wrong. Of those 12 symptoms that I just listed, my former employer exhibited 9 of them. He would habitually shout at me, blame me for things that other people did, alternating that with flattering me and just gushing and telling me I was wonderful and fantastic, and then going back the next day to berating me, blaming me. He would always tell me over and over again that other companies weren't going to appreciate me the way he did, that no one else was going to see my potential except him. If I ever objected to the way he talked to me, he would immediately turn the tables. He would become defensive and act hurt and react as if I had crossed a line somehow by saying that. And he didn't just do it to me, he did it to other employees as well, which I did see. He would play mind games with them. For example, we had a carpenter who made an error on a kitchen install. The countertop didn't fit when we brought it. We had to replace the stone. And the carpenter felt terrible about it, but my employer told the carpenter that it cost us $1,500 to replace the countertop. The carpenter later found out from the stone vendors themselves that they replaced it for free. And my employer had known that. He had known it was free, and he had told him it cost us $1,500 because he was trying to manipulate him. He was trying to make him feel guilty and use it as a power play. One thing he really didn't like was if any of my clients complimented me. If anyone ever came to me and said, oh, Emily was so wonderful, she was so patient, I loved working with her, he would get physically uncomfortable. He would fidget. He would look just like he didn't like hearing it. And as soon as the client left the room, he would turn to me and undercut it. He would immediately jump in and say, wow, if they keep saying that, your ego is going to explode. You're going to be so arrogant. Your head's going to inflate so big that you won't be able to fit through the door. That's what he would say. He said that phrase multiple times. It was his kind of catchphrase. Yet at the same time, as he was warning me against the sins of pride that I was about to fall into, he would just constantly pour on the flattery. He was always telling me, "You're such a wonderful employee. You're so hardworking. Who's better than you? You're fantastic," and just buttering me up all the time. I had been working there for less than a year when he offered to sell me the business as a token of how much he respected me and appreciated my genius and intelligence. I did not know at the time that the first phase of almost every emotionally abusive relationship is what they call the love bombing phase. So, what's love bombing? Love bombing is when the abuser pours on love, affirmation, and affection in order to charm the victim. Someone who's being abusive, they are going to feel out and detect your needs and your insecurities. Abusers can be very intuitive in that way. And they're going to feel out what you need, and then they're going to try to fill those needs. They're going to say, oh, this person needs affirmation, they need praise, I will pour on the affirmation and praise. It's a way of them baiting the fish hook. Once you've swallowed the bait, once you've swallowed the flattery and the affirmation, now you're on the line. Because you have now become dependent on them for all this praise and affirmation, they can, by giving and withholding praise, try to control your actions. And if they successfully cut you off from friends or family members, they can make you so dependent that they are the only person that you can go to get praise and affirmation and love. And that's their goal. So a pretty clear marker that this is going on is if you're with someone who it felt like they gave you a lot of praise and affirmation at the beginning when you initially met them, but now, even though it feels like you're trying harder than ever to please them, nothing's ever good enough. That is a pretty good indicator that you have gone through the love bombing phase. They praised you at the beginning, and now they're cutting you off in order to try to make you do what they want. And it's not clear that this is happening a lot of the time. This is usually a case of boiling the frog. No abuser starts out being abusive out of the gate. Nobody hits someone on the first date. No one's gonna, they do it slowly. They build up to it. They escalate things gradually because you're less likely to notice. What makes this kind of abuse so potent is that it gives you the illusion of filling your needs. Everyone has a need for affirmation, for praise, for love. I wanted my employer to be pleased with me. I wanted him to praise me. And my boss figured that out. He detected that need I had, and then he exploited it. Honestly, when he started pouring on the flattery, I soaked it up like a sponge. And then once he had me on the line, once I really got hungry for his praise and affirmation, he would try to pressure me into doing things I didn't agree with. He would, be it lying to clients, submitting expired licenses to town hall officials, or committing warranty fraud. I never went along with it because I was a Christian and I knew it was wrong and I had those principles, but he never stopped trying to pressure me into doing that. The trouble is, victims of emotional abuse, women in particular, we often have an inaccurate perspective on our own strengths and weaknesses. We inflate our strengths, we minimize our weaknesses, and we ignore threats. So, for example, in our current cultural climate, we have a huge emphasis on power, empowerment, self-actualization, self-reliance. Those are the buzzwords of the day. We really want power, and certain ideologies like feminism really will point us to look to ourselves. You get power from within. You need power, it's in there. It's this untapped well of strength. Of course, as Christians, we know you cannot find freedom from looking within. If you try, you will only get trapped. And that's what happened to me. Honestly, I felt really empowered at my job. By the time I was 21 years old, I had the management of the entire office. I ran it, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I had a really big workload, and when 2 other employees left the company, I took on the lion's share of their responsibilities in addition to my workload that I already had, and I never complained about it. I remember walking around that office feeling like $1,000,000, feeling like I own the place. And I remember even thinking, this shows you where my heart was. I remember thinking, you know, if I wanted to, a flick of my hand and I could sabotage this place completely. I had that much power. I had access to the books. I had access to the orders. I could have jacked that company up very badly if I had wanted to. And I liked feeling that powerful. It was addictive. The truth is, though I was never a feminist, I thought I was made of steel. I really did. I was incredibly proud of being independent and self-reliant. I was a really hard worker. I was a self-taught. I learned fast. I was competitive. I never liked to ask for help, and I worked incredibly hard. I was, in short, incredibly arrogant. But I was also ignoring my weaknesses. I had a massive chip on my shoulder because I didn't have a college degree. And in Connecticut, that was a really big deal. I couldn't afford going to college, and that actually created another level of dependence on my employer because I honestly didn't think I was going to get another job in my field because I didn't have a college degree, so I just had to put up with his gaslighting. I really felt that way. But even though I felt so powerful, I also thought everyone was looking down on me and didn't think I was qualified to do the work I was doing because I didn't have a college degree. So I always felt I had to work really hard to prove myself. The traits that I thought made me powerful, my independence, my competition, they actually made me weak. They were the chinks in my armor that my boss used to emotionally manipulate me. That combination of pride, chip on my shoulder, being in denial about my insecurities and weaknesses created the perfect cocktail to make me susceptible to emotional abuse. And at the same time, I was too proud to honestly admit to anybody what was going on. My need to prove myself made it very easy for my boss to overwork me and underpay me, and I never complained about it. And the whole time he did it, he made me think that I was the dominant, empowered one. One of the worst misconceptions about emotional abuse is that the victims of it must be weak, timid doormats. They're just little Cinderellas. We think that you can protect women from being exploited and manipulated if you just give her a good education, give her self-defense classes, encourage empowerment, make her confident in the world. Those will protect her. In the truth, they don't. Although women who have been abused sometimes fit the stereotype of the submissive, dependent, helpless woman, many are the opposite. Strong, independent people. They sometimes hold important, demanding professional positions as doctors, media performers, or teachers, or they may work in traditionally male trades. Leslie Morgan Steiner elaborated about her own marriage in her TED Talk. One of the smartest things my husband did from the very beginning was to create the illusion that I was the dominant partner in the relationship. Why did I stay? The answer was easy. I didn't know that he was abusing me, even though he held those loaded guns to my head, pushed me downstairs, threatened to kill our dog, pulled the key out of the car ignition as I drove down the highway. I never once thought of myself as a battered wife. Instead, I was a very strong woman in love with a deeply troubled man. She also added in her book, I had stifled my own fears even after the attacks started. My husband had held a gun to my head and I had not been afraid. It was my elemental mistake that I did not listen to my own voice trying to warn me about the danger I was in. I'm going to talk in my next video more about how women get trapped in emotionally or physically abusive relationships, the ways we ignore our vulnerabilities, and the way we feed ourselves the lie of empowerment. But for the time being, I want to leave you with an encouraging note. The most important thing to remember is that an abused person, an abused woman, is not necessarily weak. The physically abused women in our study did not as a rule become passive, docile, or submissive. In fact, we discovered that as a group, they were resourceful, heroic, and consistently held their ground. This is a very bold stance. What I think we often fail to realize is that while it's tempting to just blame society or other people for our problems, our biggest threat to our own safety and happiness is our own heart. We are our own worst enemy. My pride, that trait that I thought made me so powerful, was my biggest weakness. Pride is deadly. It can and will trap you, or even kill you. When I continued to hold on to my pride, I was trapped. But when I finally let it go, when I came to God in humility and asked Him to save me, that set me free. I didn't free myself. I was not self-empowered. I did not self-actualize. God did that. God did that for me. A Bible verse I'd like to leave you all with is James chapter 4, verse 6. But He gives more grace. Therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Thank you all so much for watching.